Hello, I'm Dave and welcome to the City of the Future and the third video in a series dedicated to the restoration of a Sinclair C5 electric vehicle. At the end of the last video we left the C5 in a great big pile of bits. Well, the chassis has been off to the sandblasters, it's been powder coated and is in pristine condition. So it's time to clean up the other parts, replace any found to be worn out, and try and get the thing back together again. So let's start by cleaning the body shell, which is made of polypropylene, so you can use a number of solvents on it. But in C5 circles, the recommended cleaning products are all domestic, and they include Cif and everybody's favourite Sillet Bang. So what I thought we'd do is we'd take the two in a head-to-head and clean one side in Cif and the other in Sillet Bang and see how we get on. So what's the verdict? Well, I can honestly say I don't think there's much in it. There's still a few bits of muck here which might need a bit of more thorough attention. We'll come on to that in a minute with a scouring pad, but let's call it a draw. As you can see here, there's a few stubborn stains that won't come out with the brush, so let's try another method, and that's a standard scouring pad. And that does seem to have made an improvement. And with the C5 on its side, we can pop off these two tabs and push the light forward. Okay, so now to deal with the two rear wheels. The left-hand wheel cover just lifts straight off. The right-hand wheel also lifts straight off, but might be a bit stiffer because of the cup in the middle. And here's the chassis, and it's in pretty fine condition, having been bead blasted and powder coated. I'm very pleased with it. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the other metal parts. The rear location frame, the steering stem, front brake calipers and the forks. I started by sanding them down, first with a 240 grit paper. The forks needed something coarser. I think they've been coated rather than painted. Then back to the 240 grit, followed by a finer 400 grit paper. Then a quick wipe over with white spirit to remove any dirt and grease. And then I masked off the upper part of the forks. Next, I sprayed on the primer. I applied several light coats to try and avoid drips. With everything primed and time left for the paint to dry, I moved on to the black gloss paint. And 4 coats later, the metalwork is looking good. Now I've spent some time outside with a bottle of white spirit and an old toothbrush cleaning up the various smaller parts, washers, bolts and bearings, cleaning off all the old muck and grease, ready to go back on the C5. Now with the muck gone, it's highlighted another problem. There's this large gear here which is made of plastic, and I can see now that it's clean a number of cracks in it. Now it's not a big problem, it's okay to go back on, but it does highlight a shortcoming with the C5. It was all built to a price, a low price, in common with other Sinclair products, and there are some parts that really should have been made out of metal. I also used white spirit on some larger pieces to remove oil and grease, as well as on the plastic parts to remove that last layer of dirt. I've tried to replace some of the most noticeable fixings, like on the front brake caliper and the bolts and washers that hold the canopy to the chassis. Others I've tried cleaning up, for example with a bit of vinegar to remove rust. It's worth pointing out some useful online resources for the Sinclair C5 owner such as myself, the first of which is the original owner's handbook, and that's available on c5owners.com. It includes this very useful exploded diagram and parts list which has helped me in the restoration process. Not least I've been able to give the parts their correct names. We've also got the Unofficial Sinclair C5 Service Manual, and this document's available on c5alive.co.uk. It's been written by some of the original C5 development team along with some enthusiasts, and it gives you a bit of a history about the development of the C5 as well as some very detailed information on the electrical system and also some reliability modifications. More on those later on. We've also got some what look to be course notes for the budding C5 service engineer who might have taken a course in repairing the C5 back in 1985, marked as confidential, but it is available for download on c5owners.com. It includes some troubleshooting tips and also some interesting historical artifacts such as this Hoover C5 repair form. And of course there's a rich seam of videos about the Sinclair C5 here on YouTube, including my own disassembly video. That's part 2 of this series. I've been through the video, taken about 100 still frames, added some words to produce a step-by-step disassembly guide, and you can look at that on your phone or tablet whilst you're in the workshop. Or, like me, you might want to print off a hard copy and scribble a few notes as you're going along. Very useful when you're taking it apart or indeed putting it back together again, which is my next job. I won't show you the complete rebuild, as it's just the reverse of the teardown which was covered off in the last video, but I'll stop along the way with a few tips and to replace some faulty parts. Okay, so the first of the new parts to go on are the inner tube and tyre for the front wheel. I'm going to be using Schwalbe Big Apple tyres all the way round on the C5. These have so-called balloon technology, which is supposed to help with the suspension and give you a more comfortable ride. I noticed the rim is a bit worn. This is quite common as it's made of plastic, but it's okay for now. With the front wheel back on, I fitted some new brake blocks and brake cables. These came from eBay as being suitable for the C5, but you can just buy some standard cables and trim them down to size. and the front forks and brake caliper are looking good after their respray. And with the addition of a few cable ties to hold the brake cable, the body shell can go back on. Fixed in place with the new M6 bolts and washers. With the right hand brake lever back on, we can set up the front brake. We've got both fine and coarse controls for the cable tension. The coarse tension is set with the cable clamp and bolt. We then fine tune the cable tension using the screw at the top of the caliper, and you can see the brake blocks backing off from the forks as it's adjusted. And finally set the position using the locking nut. And I'll have another go at the fine adjustment after a test ride. There are caged bearings all over the C5 and I've packed them with fresh grease before refitting. Setting up the rear brake is a similar process to the front. First set the coarse tension using the pinch anchor bolt. Next, offer up the wheel and activate the brake. The rubber brake pad should hold the wheel firmly. If it doesn't, tighten the brake cable further. For fine adjustment, turn the screw and then lock in position with the bolt once you're happy. Now, keeping an eye on eBay, I was able to pick up this faulty control box for just £12, so it's a good source of a replacement lid, as well as being a source of spare parts in the future should I ever need them. And the thing is complete. Some of the terminal posts are a bit rusty, but all of the components are there and nothing is burnt up. And these self-tapping screws from CPC seem to fit well. Now, in reassembling the motor support, I was wondering about the purpose of this metal bracket. So I asked a question on the Facebook forum and I was told that it's actually an official Sinclair modification. And what it does is it stops this plastic of the motor support from twisting when the motor's under strain, which would in turn cause wear on these teeth. Now, if you haven't got this official Sinclair bracket, you can just use some cable ties, as you can see in this photo sent across by Lee. Before we try and get the main gear back on, it's worth mentioning that the gearbox is asymmetrical on its mount, and that'll help us get the belt on in a moment. I don't know if you can see, but the distance between here and here is less than the distance between here and here. So if we offer up the main gear with the belt on and another washer, there was already one washer behind, we'll see if we can get this on. And there we go, it's looking a bit tight to get the belt on, but if I rotate the motor back and a little bit more, I can get it on. As you can see, the belt's quite loose there, so we can now tension the drive belt up and we'll rotate the motor backwards. Mind the fingers. And finally, tighten up the nut on the motor support. And with a bit of air in the tyres, they're ready to go. Now you'll notice that the wheel trims are a bit scruffed up. Now I've been advised against trying to sand them, so they're just going to have to do as they are. But they're looking a lot cleaner and a lot fresher. And over to the right hand rear wheel. Here's a brand new bearing in its cup with plenty of grease. In the teardown video there were actually 2 bearings found here and one was damaged. And on goes the outer bearing. Followed by the cone nut. Now to make the next step a little easier, I've treated myself on eBay to this. It's an official Sinclair C5 maintenance kit. And inside we find a bike spanner, nothing unusual about that. And a special spanner for dealing with the cone nut, for holding it in place whilst we tighten the outer locking nut. So with the cone nut in place, not too tight because we don't want to squash the bearings, we can fit the locking nut, pop on the cone nut tool, which holds the cone nut in place, and then tighten the locking nut. The chain has been cleaned up and now just needs some fresh oil. Finally, the boot can go back on. As a finishing touch, I thought I'd try some of this Autoglim bumper and trim gel from Halfords just to shine up the rear light. And looking from an angle, it's definitely added a bit of extra shine. So I've also used it on the front light, the interior cabin and the pedals. And I thought I'd try some back to black bumper and trim restorer on the pod just to rejuvenate the black plastic. The front wheel cover had been spray painted, so I used some nail polish remover which has got acetone in it to remove the paint, ready for some new decals to be applied. I used a screwdriver to scrape off the side stripes and clean off the glue with white spirit. Now for replacement tape, the type to buy is orange reflective tape, the sort with hexagons on it. It should be 2 centimeters wide, but I couldn't find any of that, so I bought 5 centimeters tape and cut it down with some scissors. And finally apply some new reflective decals to the wheel covers. Well, that's the C5 all back together again, and hopefully you'll agree, looking in pretty fine condition. There's still a few scrapes and scrawps on the body shell. I'd have liked to have improved upon them, but I was advised against trying to sand them down. That's it for this video. Hopefully you'll join me for the 4th and final part, dedicated to the vehicle electrics, this being billed as a pioneering electric means of transportation. I'll be fitting a safety wiring loom, trying to improve upon these screw terminals here for the battery. I'll be repairing the intermittent connection at the pod and undertaking a full strip down and service of the C5's motor. Bye for now.